Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'd like to welcome you to the Executive Fibro Chat for Fibromyalgia Awareness Month. We're going to be talking about the roundtable that occurred on Monday, May 20th, and we're going to discuss resilience and how we see it and thoughts that we had based on the presenters on Monday, who were, by the way, Tyler Dillman. He is a physiotherapist. Dr. Andrea Furlan is a physiatrist. And Eleanor McGroaty is a psychologist. So that discussion was very well received, and we thought it'd be nice if we added the patient voice to that. So I'm going to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territories and unceded territories of the Indigenous peoples across Canada, First Nation, Métis, and Indigenous and Inuit. I almost forgot. We would like to honor their enduring connection to the land and are committed to fostering respectful and meaningful relationships with all Indigenous communities. I would like to acknowledge and give thanks to the land on which we live, work, and play, and the people who have cared for it. I am speaking to you from Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. In Nova Scotia, we are all treaty people. So first thing we're going to do is introduce ourselves, because this is the the FAC Executive. I'll be okay today. My name is Trudy Flynn, and I am the chair of the board of Fibromyalgia Association Canada. I have lived with fibromyalgia for over 30 years, and I live just outside Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'll turn it over to the vice chair of FAC. Go ahead, Sherry.
I am Sherry Wasdall. I am out in the Calgary, Alberta area, and I have had fibro, I think, since I was a teenager, but didn't officially get diagnosed until 2019, somewhere in there. So,
Thank you. Mary?
My name's Mary Delaney, and I live in Kingston. I'm the secretary to the board of directors for FAC, and also I'm on the education committee. I've had fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed in, I think it was 2015, but I went off work due to it in 2013. So that's how long I've had fibromyalgia. And a little bit
Maggie?
about
I'm Maggie O'Brien. I'm from Windsor, Ontario. I've been ill for quite a while, ill while working. Around 2018, I was officially diagnosed after a long series of visits with doctors and trying to sort things out. Then I was forcibly retired from work. I am the treasurer, and I'm also on the advocacy chair. Um, and I enjoy working with FAC and finding our community and supporting one another while we go through this chronic illness. Thank you, Trudy.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, Sherry is also on the education committee, and she is our web developer. And I am an ex officiary member of all the committees, but I chair the education awareness and research committees. So thank you, everybody. So let's get started. I just wanted to talk about one of the things we asked our presenters was what they thought the definition of resilience is. So did you agree with their definitions? Do you have your own definitions? What do you think?
go ahead, Mary.
Well, this is where I bring my prop in, is because when we were talking about strength and resilience, it reminded me of an elastic, where when you think about, well, what is resilience? Well, here's an elastic, and here it is being stretched beyond its original place. And then when I let it go, it just snaps right back. And that's kind of a little bit of an example of what resilience is. It's the ability to snap back, to adapt to what's happening in your life, and it's can be expressed in a lot of ways. But one way to think about it is the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, and these are big circumstances in our lives. So that's how I see resilience, being able to snap back, adapt to the things that are changing in our lives.
Sherry, you were going to say something?
Oh, I recall Dr. Furlan's example where she used a piece of paper, and I think it was a piece of leather or something like that, and how you were able to crumple them up. And I just thought it was such a good analogy that she used for resilience, in that, like, yeah, paper, it can be flattened out and straightened out again, but it takes way more effort to get it back to its original resilient shape, right, that it was before. And I feel that that's like, fibro is very, very much the same way. It takes a lot of effort to get it back to normal, to get it back to where it used to be. So I thought that was a really good analogy that she gave too. And Mary's, yours is really the stretch, right? Like, that's, we get very stretched. So both good explanations of resilience, I think.
Yeah.
I liked Eleanor's when she talked about the willow tree and the oak, and
Mm-hmm.
how the willow tree can bend and so makes it very resilient. It just bounces back. Whereas the oak tree, if enough wind hits the oak tree or enough stress hits the oak tree, it breaks. So I kind of like that
Yeah.
one. Maggie, what about you?
Well, Eleanor, she discussed the bamboo and how you bend and stretch and you accommodate, the wind or the changes. But um, at first, it was difficult for me to grasp. Like, I understand the terms resilience. I understand that we have to be very um, tough and endure this chronic illness. But I never really put it to terms until Eleanor explained, because sometimes with us, words can be lip service. But when Eleanor explained about resilience, um, and then she transferred that conversation about using some somatic work to get your body to calm down and to get it. For me, it's all about fight or flight. So that's my verbiage, and how to get your body to calm down. That's when it clicked for me. Because I know we're all tough. I know we all deal with, like Sherry used the word, to get our fibro back to normal, copable, acceptable. And it's strange that we think that way. And it's true. It's, when you're dealing with the chronic illness, at this point, I can deal with it. When I'm in a flare, I'm in a crisis, I lose that ability. And I actually forget about, I know I'm going to be fine. I know I'm going to get through it. I know that this is going to pass, as we've talked about. The hard part for me is to think about that term resilience. I think more about, how do I get out of fight or flight? How do I get through this crisis and make myself more comfortable? So for the people that might be watching this and think, oh, those are just terms, that's lip service, we stretch that verbiage to work so we understand that, as fibro is very variable, like that's variable for everybody, so is our coping methods. We use a wide variety of coping methods. But when Eleanor used the word somatic and she talked about singing, using vibration work, using breathing exercises, grounding exercises, that also shows the variety of techniques that we use to get this not in control, because it never is. Let's not fool ourselves. But to get it where we can deal with it, make it more acceptable. And the big tone of my resilience, my last piece, and then I'll pass over, is giving yourself permission when you are not that resilient to rest and not feeling guilty, because that guilty will add to your ability to get through it more calmly and quickly. Thank you.
Do you know, Maggie, that's really interesting because I would, um, I, we, bugs in our area this year is crazy. And we have not had very much sunshine. So at lunchtime, I thought I'm going to go out and and I even wore a bug net over me, right? I'm going out. I'm going to enjoy the sun while we have it because apparently tomorrow we aren't going to. And we only had it yesterday and today. So I went out, and when I came back in, they had, and I had it tightened the way you're supposed to. But anyway, they got either they were on my clothes or whatever. But when I came back in, and if I didn't have makeup on, you could see the bug bites. This year, for some reason, I'm reacting to these. So I really reacted, and they were in my hair. They were everywhere when I got back in the house. And I thought, and I kind of had a reaction. I thought, I am not going to be able to think coherently during this presentation. And I thought of what Eleanor said about singing or chanting. And so I turned on my music, I started singing, and that helped. I was really, really surprised. I have never used that technique before to make myself feel better. And so here I am singing away, and Natasha comes in and she says, "Are you late for this presentation?" I'm like, anyway, I the whole story is that it really helped. It helped even not just my fibromyalgia, it seemed to have helped the allergic reactions. So I
You
thought
know,
I put that in action. Sherry?
same thing for me too. I actually had forgotten that she talked about singing in there. And I remember at the time of the presentation, oh yeah, I used to do that. I used to years ago work in the restaurant industry, and it was hardcore. It was so busy and so crazy. And I remember singing at the top of my lungs as I went into the kitchen, and the cooks thought I was just crazy. But I'm singing because it helped me like ground myself and just relax and have some fun. Yeah, it was busy, but it was going to be okay. If I can still sing, I'm going to be just fine. So I forgot about that. Thanks for bringing that up again.
Yeah, that was great. And I think it's a very practical thing. I mean, just put your headphones on, turn up the music, and away you go.
But
So
it's
easy.
not being not just positive. It's not, just, all happy sunshine rainbows positivity. She explained, and I'm kind of quoting her roughly, that it brings down the vibration brings down your cortisol. And when we are in those, I'm going to call it a crisis, or when you're reacting, whether it's MCAS, fibro, all those things, right? Bringing down all those levels and calming the system will help reduce how we react to it all, right? And that was the key thing where I went, oh, okay, I'm getting where they're driving this car, right? Um, but forgive me for thinking that way, but it took that understanding with the somatic process. And I'm not super scientific. I know Trudy is, and she really likes the research. But for me, it's more, I don't like when people pay lip service, right?
Mhm.
So they're not just paying lip service, they're giving us techniques, and they're telling us, use a wide variety. And that leads me to my next point, where um, Tyler Dillman, he said, and I give them a lot of credit because where in Fibro do you hear all your guest speakers acknowledge? First of all, Tyler acknowledged how difficult and challenging Fibro is to cope with and live with. He said, quote unquote, like pretty well. And then he said, like for day to day, but then to understand how movement and exercise, he was saying like it's hard to digest, right? Because you're in so much pain. So to get that recognition from the field is huge, and not just from Tyler. Andrea and Eleanor, they all understood, but to hear that it is real, it's not in your head, it's challenging, it's difficult. And then Dr. Furlan said that it's an invisible disability. We do not get enough recognition for this. She called it a chronic disease from the field. And I was elated not to hear that about fibro, but to have that recognition from them, from the other side of the table, to hear that, they get it, they understand. Like day to day is difficult, right? Especially, as Trudy said, the episodic. So that really impressed me.
It's interesting. And then Mary, I'm going to let you have the camera.
Okay.
It's interesting about the singing because I have experience in the dementia. That I worked dementia before I had to retire, and also my mom had Alzheimer's. And singing is something we would have dementia patients who were in a crisis, and that's common. And we would use music, and we would turn music on, or we would sing. And it was absolutely amazing to watch someone who didn't even recognize their own children calm down and become peaceful. And so it really does work. And so if it can work at that level where people who have lost their cognitive abilities and their memories, it's a it's kind of a no-brainer that it's going to work for people like us, right? But I never really thought of it as a therapeutic device, so to say. It's interesting. And I think it's important having presenters like them because I I should have realized that, but yet I didn't. So, Mary, what have you got to say?
Well, what I would say is when it comes to what's the purpose of these things, what's the purpose of strength and resilience? And when you look at, well, when Maggie was talking about the somatic stuff, what is that? That's getting our body to a place where we are calmer, we're more able to deal with stuff, and as opposed to being disabled to deal with our stuff, which is a huge part of fibromyalgia, the disability part. But Eleanor said that resilience can be built, and that high levels of pain can take away our ability to feel joy, to find meaning in our lives. But if we can look to these other ideas, these things that we can bring in and incorporate in our life, such as singing or mindfulness or meditation, these things are going to help us overall, because there's a lot to adjust to here, because we go from a place of where we can do things to a place of, oh my goodness, there are so many things that I can't do now. And so when we look to our strengths, we can try to ferret out, well, where are those things that I can do? And what can I do to make it a little bit better? Because that's kind of what it's about, trying to make things a little bit better for us. A cure would be lovely, but being able to deal with it in a better way is fabulous too.
I agree with you, Mary. It's dealing day to day, right? And so I think that's what's important, learning how to deal day to day. So we're all going to be singing in the shower and singing while we're cooking and singing while we're vacuuming. So, Sherry, how about you?
How about me? What? I don't
What,
know.
what do you think
Mary,
about coping devices?
you know, there were a lot of suggestions offered and ideas and things that came out of that round table that just like I recall one particular thing that Tyler specifically spoke about. Movement, we know movement is such an important component of of making ourselves feel better. But with fibro, oh my gosh, like, ugh, it's so tough, right? And one of the amazing things that he said that really finally clicked, because I've heard him speak before, and he talks about going low and slow. You know, we need to gradually add movement back and build up that trust with our bodies again. And but also understand that it's a long game. And how he phrased it was, it's like stacking paper. And I thought, yeah, it is, exactly. Like, I know you, Trudy, used to run marathons, right? I never did that. I was never the marathon girl, hate running. But maybe the solution for me is starting walking for 3 minutes, right? And some people are like, God, why even bother? It's 3 minutes. Because that's where I need to start. That is the place that I am. And that's my first piece of paper is 3 minutes. And maybe tomorrow it's 4.5 minutes. And maybe next week it's 5.5 minutes. And the week after that, maybe a wind blows through and blows up my stack of paper, and I got to start over again. But that willingness to accept that that's what I can do, and that some movement is better than zero movement, right? So I thought that was a pretty impressive suggestion from Tyler for sure.
Well, you know, he also mentioned marathon, right? He talked about it. It's a marathon. And so I told you guys the story about this man who ran marathons here in Halifax. He won them all. Okay. So he did that for years. And his wife had triplets. And he decided that year that he wouldn't spend all summer training for marathons and all winter because it takes an incredibly long time to train for a marathon. And he was needed at home. So he thought, okay, well, I run marathons. I can just run a 10K. And so what he said after he ran the 10K, and he did not win it by a long shot, he couldn't believe it. He's like, I started the race and I started at my usual marathon pace, which is slow. You have to pace yourself in a marathon if you want to finish it. And by the time he realized that it's not quite the same thing running 10K as it is running 42K, everybody was gone and he was at the back end of the middle of the pack. Okay. And he was shocked. Like, this is a man who never lost a run or a race. So he realized that marathon training did not guarantee him a win. And that's because if you're running 10K, you're running faster. And if you're running 5K, you're running even faster. Those are the runs that sprinting happens. And he was not a sprinter. He was the slow and steady, gets you where you're going.
He
And
didn't
that
adjust.
that's right. He didn't adjust. And so I thought that was a really good analogy by Tyler. And the thing is, we're in the marathon and we have to adjust because we're not going out there running the 5K sprint and we're not out there running the 10K sprint even. I couldn't believe it this year. Natasha and I volunteered at the Blue Nose Marathon, and people came in, they 35 minutes, 40 minutes running 10 kilometers. And I'm like, whoa, they just keep getting faster and faster. But we have to accept the fact that we're the marathoners.
Life
And
is different for us.
life is different for us.
Sure.
Maggie?
I can say from personal experience, and I'm the last 4 or 5 years with POTS and fibro and all the other comorbidities. Last year, towards the end of the summer, I got in a warm pool, and I went from being pretty seized up all the time, you know, the coat hanger pain in the traps, and I got in a warm pool, and I always had music going outside, and I just had no intention of doing anything major other than getting in the pool every day for about an hour and just moving. However I moved, whether it was walking back and forth, floating, and I didn't look at it as exercise. I just stretched and moved in the pool. And I was shocked at the difference. And I did that for about 6 weeks towards the end of the summer until the end of October when the pool was closed. And what a difference it made on my life. So I stopped doing my like weekly lidocaine trigger point injections unless my neck seizes up really bad. And I was finding them quite painful at that point anyway, so I was pretty glad. But that movement, that little bit of movement, with the buoyancy in the pool, which is amazing, especially with POTS, allowed me to move better. And I wasn't doing laps, don't get me wrong. Um, it released my neck, it released a lot of pain. I still have, bad pain days and what have you, but I'm not completely seized up anymore. So, and I went from years ago doing, the 10K in the Army with all our equipment, all that stuff, mile and a half with policing. I haven't done that for years, like, you know, so for me, to be able to get back in and move, it was a huge deal. So keep an open mind, listen to them when they say gentle movement, even if it's laying in your bed, doing what I call bed yoga, just slight stretching, slight movement, start slowly. There's tons of stuff on YouTube. Keep an open mind and be positive about it and just try it. They're not trying to put you off and say just lose weight. They're just trying to say keep moving, right? So I appreciate that, but I wanted someone to have it from a person who was seized up and moving to explain it. So that was a big connection too. I truly agree with everything they said.
At another conversation that Tyler had for us, and his video, their videos are on our YouTube channel and on our website. He talked about if you've been bedridden for a while or if you have difficulty moving. He talked about isometric movements, just starting with isometric movements. And isometric movements is just tighten, loose. And he said that's the best way to get started if you're afraid of movement because that's not going to hurt you. So it's amazing. And then you can move on from there, right? And so he's, what I like about Tyler is as a physiotherapist, he's not like, go lift weights, go do this, go do that. He's very much in tune to what it's like having fibromyalgia. He's a great contributor. So he's what you would call an ally of the fibromyalgia community, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, absolutely, they all are, right? They're all
Yes, they all
very
are.
positive, very full of good intention information, and well educated.
Yeah.
So uh, I really enjoyed Eleanor. I'd like to have Eleanor back, to get people to come around to the idea of accepting more help with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I think a lot of people are quick to say, I don't need that, but they don't realize it's also about how we get ourselves out of that, the we get run down the day to day, like when I was stuck in fight or flight. So there's a lot of things to learn from CBT. So I think that's really important.
Well, just an update. They are coming back. So we're just in the process of setting a date for another round table in September. So they were very, very happy with the round table themselves. They said they've never taken part in a round table where their minds were so much in sync. Like they really enjoyed it. Right after, I got an email from Dr. Furlan saying, wow, that was wonderful. I've never not had anyone disagree with what I'm saying. Everybody agreed with everybody, right?
That's always nice. Yeah, for sure. But
Yeah,
they've never, none of them have worked together in the,
no.
like in the industry together. They just, I mean, I'm sure they must have crossed paths before, but to have virtual strangers also in the healthcare field with you, to be so in sync and like just of that same mindset, right? It's very encouraging. So
Did you catch on where Eleanor mentioned how important it is to tell your story, to get that because it weighs on your mind when you first get diagnosed or you're first dealing with it or you're going through, not being able to work anymore. And she goes, you got to get those big truths out, is what she said. And we've always said as fact that it's very healing to be here, to get out with the faces of fibro, to discuss, where you've come from, what you're dealing with, and even in like a volunteer setting to share information or share stories. So I think that's something I'd like to run with somehow more, to get people to write or blog about their stories, because I personally found it very helpful. Um, to be able to help them with through their phases of grief and acceptance as well.
I think we'll get to that, Maggie, when we start our community support in the fall. That's the intention of meeting with people, letting them share their stories. So, what do you think, Mary? Oh, sorry, Sherry.
No, go ahead, Mary.
Well, when it comes to telling our story, I think it's important to do that, to try to wrap our mind around what happened. And we're caught in this vortex of why, and wanting it to not be the case, and being reactive against it, when they all talked about acceptance, and that's pretty important in the process of moving forward in a problem, because it seems that in life, change is a constant in a sense, and our lives change, our abilities change, and everyone is in that position at one time or another. I had a friend who was quite disabled, and she was very active back then in the disability community, and she said that everyone in their lives at some point will become disabled. It could be for 5 minutes before you pass away, or it could be for 30, 40 years in your perhaps the heyday of our middle age, for example, which was where I was. And there were a lot of losses, a lot of things to look to that were things that were taken away from me. And so rather than like resilience and strength would be about taking those things and learning how to navigate around them and develop the coping tools that will aid us in that process. And so the somatic work, the mindfulness, meditation, getting that cortisol level down, because stress in itself is what they call it, a killer, right? So the CBT is important because it's about getting your mind right. Cognitive behavior therapy, because what we have is cognitive thinking, we have our behavior, and what's in between those two things is our emotional state. And so if we can keep our mind straight and recognize that what we think, in a way, like Buddha says, we create the world with our mind. And so if we can use CBT to adjust our mind, to say to ourselves, hey, yeah, this is bad, but look at what the gifts that have been given to me. And so, for me, I think about FAC, and it's like it's been the best thing, really, other than joining choir, I would say. It's the best thing in my life. So if you don't accept your life and the things that happen to it, um, then we're going to rail against it and push against it rather than simply flow through our lives, kind of like we were meant to, in a way. So, just some food for thought on that.
Sherry?
I like both of you have said things that just like bring back so much from that round table for me. One particular thing that Dr. Furlan had said, um, sort of alluding to what Mary's talking to here, is that with fibro, it's like being in this tug of war with an invisible monster. And you need to just drop the rope and walk away. Like, why would you waste your energy? Right. And we have this slippery slope where we're in grief and we deny and we rail against, to use your examples. And really that monster is, it's not, fibro is not an injury that we can heal from. It's kind of like a misfire of the brain. And so that monster that's in there, they're pulling and pulling and pulling against, and it's yanking us back, and we get sucked into this vortex over and over again. Why not just drop the rope and focus on the things that we can make a difference with? And back to what Maggie said too, Eleanor talked about grief. And one of the things that she talked about is the importance of sitting with that grief and visiting that grief and understanding that grief and going into that crummy, dark place. But what she really said that was so profound to me was when she mentioned going into the darkness to find out what lights us up, right? We spend so much time being sad and brokenhearted about who we used to be, what we used to be able to do. And it's frustrating. And we have to allow ourselves to have that grief sometimes. But she talked about how it's also grief for what we're not going to be able to do in the future as well, right? I might not get to see my grandkids. I might not get to take them to the park, which I don't have grandkids, but that's just my example, right? We are sad and fearful for what the future holds for us if there's no cure for this, if there's no, that kind of thing. But it is imperative that we move through that darkness and through that grief to try and find the thing that makes us happy, the thing that can bring us out of the darkness again. And I on a personal level, I feel very, very privileged that I was able to find the thing that lights me up and turn it into a job, because it has empowered me so much to be adaptable on the days where I can't get out of bed because I can only do some leg lifts and bed yoga, right? Or, I have a headache or whatever the case may be. I was able to find my joy and turn it into my self-employment job. And then I decide when I go to work and I decide how much work I'm going to do today. So I feel very privileged that I am at that stage in my journey already. I think especially when we first get diagnosed, it's incredibly difficult to see past the darkness, right? So yeah, those were my.
Sherry, that's very good. That's important, I think, to see past the darkness. So I, like Maggie said, I'm involved in a lot of research, and not all on fibromyalgia. I actually have been part of trauma-informed research, and how the constant sharing your story, the toll it takes on you. And so I think Eleanor, or maybe it was Dr. Furlan, that mentioned it's good to tell your story, and it's good to tell your story again, but eventually you need to accept, okay, this is my story, and move on, because some of this trauma-informed research say that people who need to always keep sharing their story, they don't get on to the acceptance stage that Mary talked about. And I think listening to Dr. Furlan, I was so impressed that how she talked about acceptance, because you don't hear that from a doctor very often. And so I think that is important. We do have to. So we've got this condition. It's not going anywhere. And she used the diabetes as an example, that it's the same thing. A diabetic has an illness that's not going away, especially a type 1 diabetic, right? And so this is their life. They have to accept that, make lifestyle changes, and use their insulin the way it's been prescribed to them, because otherwise they're not going to have a very good life. Because, and I mentioned that I have two people in my family that are diabetic. one who changed their lifestyle, listened to their doctor, took the insulin the way they were supposed to, and lived a very, very productive life. And then I have the other side of that, someone who did not make lifestyle changes, someone who adjusts his insulin helter skelter, I would say. And he is not living a very good life. He's had to have a kidney transplant. He has some degree of dementia. And it's just, it never, he's had a heart attack. So he's had all the side effects of not taking care of himself as a diabetic. And so it is a choice. It's a choice. Do you want to accept and make the lifestyle changes and have a decent life, or do you want to not? And, not acceptance is the option, and it's not a good option, right?
I
Because we
totally agree
can't
with what
change it,
you
right?
said. Oh, sorry, Sherry.
Maggie, sorry. No, it's okay.
I totally agree with what you said. It's not repeating your story constantly. It's the telling it when you need to. Like for me, I had
Yes.
to hide my illness with work. And that made it difficult for me to accept it. But now when we get it out of our system and get to share with others who are going through it, it's very cathartic. It's very purging, and it helps you get like because you can get to the next level. But every now and then you might get dragged back to a different stage. It's a sliding scale, and
Several times, probably.
yeah, and that's fine. But then we've by that point we're coming to see that there are other things in our life. I'll give you one example, and it won't be too long. I went from being really busy, 12-hour shifts, 24-hour shifts, so I never got to do anything creative. That whole side of me, whether it was baking, cooking, crafting, I couldn't do any of that. I never had time. Well, now I have time, and I'm learning how to sew. I've done cake classes. I'm baking. I'm doing things I could never do before. So there's always that other side of the coin, right? So we talk about, we have to stay positive. We talk about we have to look at it, finding our new strength or learning who we are now, because everybody's always evolving. Fibro, we have to evolve with it and function. We can't just, there's times when, I'm in a flare up crisis and I give myself permission to say, okay, I'm going to, curl up in a ball and watch Netflix with all my covers. And that's okay. I accept that. I don't feel bad about that. Today I need to rest. Tomorrow, see how I feel. When I can start moving again, I'm going to move. When I need to stop, I stop. So you have to learn to listen to your body. You have to learn to listen to that part of your soul when it needs that little bit of attention, or you need to say, I miss who I was before, but I know I'm going to be something different or stronger. That takes a lot of work. It's not easy to do, but I agree. We can't just keep, expecting to retell it. But I do think it helps others how we do it, and listening to others in our groups is very helpful. And that's why, like you said, Trudy, I'm really looking forward to when we have our support side. Because I think more and more people need to have their moments with each other.
I agree. I agree, Maggie. That's true. And we do have to share our stories. We share our stories all the time, but I think it's because we've reached the acceptance stage, which is not easy for everybody. It then becomes easier to share your story without that being the thing that takes you down, right? Mary, do you have a problem sharing your story?
Of how I got fibromyalgia, or
Yeah, yeah.
oh, well, um, yeah, I was working and I was at the height of my career, and over a couple of years, I started to develop a lot of pain and when trying to walk. And it wasn't too long before I worked in the correctional system, and after a certain point, I started using a walker at work. And that's not really a highly safe kind of thing to, it's a long way to get from the parking lot to where I worked. And using a walker to get there and back is not good safety and security, I would say. But I really didn't know what to do. My doctor was away, and a friend of mine said, "Well, why don't you just go to emergency?" So off I trekked down to emergency. I packed a lunch, I phoned in sick, and I never went back to work. I
Wow.
saw a doctor there who, an intern, very lovely lad, and he got me in to see another doctor who was amazing. People were like, "How'd you get in to see him?" I'm like, "Oh, no, the intern got him to see me," and but he was in charge of the fracture unit at the hospital, and he just listened a little bit to my story. He didn't have a lot of time. But he just said, I think there's a couple of things going on here. And he threw out what he thought was happening. And I realized then that this was very serious, that it's just not going to go away on its own. And in fact, it may never. But things have been made much better by acceptance, recognizing that I need to do something about it, to be motivated to get to the doctor and talk about it and try to find things to help, because that's kind of what the process is about. To find the things that help you move through your challenges and still be able to find a place where you can achieve goals that are important to you in your life. So, but that happened when I was about 55, and it's been a good few years since. So, and in the interim, yeah, I've been through a lot of stages around um, my personal acceptance, but also recognizing that there's a whole process around other people's acceptance and what that means to me, if it's there or not, which seems to be a lion that rears its head at me from time to time. For example, one of the reasons that I joined FAC was because someone actually made fun of me when I
Oh,
was trying to talk to them about my fibromyalgia. Yeah, it was sad. I was horrified that this person would do that to me. And and I thought, well, what can I do with this? And I like to make a little joke about it that, well, I reframed the experience and I joined the Fibromyalgia Association of Canada. And I'm finding the gifts that are here for me in this life that includes fibromyalgia. And they are there. They are the people that I'm meeting, they're the skills that I'm learning, the getting back into thinking and talking and writing minutes of the board meetings and discussing things. It had been a while since I'd really engaged in and connected with people in that way, and I think it's been very good for me.
it gives
So,
you purpose, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And it reminded me a little bit about years ago, I ran across somebody who did a recording on, it was a guided meditation, and it was for people who'd had post-traumatic stress. And she took you for a walk through your heart and trying to look through where you are, what your experiences were, walking through the perhaps the shattered glass with your footsteps. And in that, as you survey your heart and you look around, you see that there are gifts for you there. And they're always there in whatever we do. There are gifts for us.
Thank you, Mary. Do you know I love you? I just love that you have the attitude that you packed a lunch and went to the emergency department. Do you know how many people are so negative and so talk about how long it took them to get there? And you so positively packed a lunch and went. I think that's wonderful. That's attitude, right? It's
Depends
all
what
about
province you're in.
mindset matters.
Yeah.
That's it. And you've got the mindset. So yeah, I had to laugh at that one. Maggie, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say it depends what province you're in with the ER, but
Oh,
and
yeah.
you know,
Oh no, I'm
I'm
pretty sure no matter where you are in Canada, you need to pack a lunch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Unless you're bleeding, like obviously.
Yeah,
and I understand
or
that
your
because
ECG's off, right? If your ECG's off or you're visibly bleeding, you might not need the lunch,
I
but
mean we don't go to the ER expecting to get, a chronic illness problem resolved. Trust me.
Yeah, that
When you
was
have
lucky.
that severe pain, I could understand that, Mary. You don't know what it is. You're in severe pain. I always, you guys hear me all the time. I talk about that really bad flu pain where every muscle hurts, you can't lift your head. And that's how my fibro really, the cyclic, that's how it always started for me. My wrists, I couldn't use my hands, I couldn't lift my wrists. So I get it. I can understand you not knowing what it is. Now we know, and then we deal with it. Everybody deals with it in their own way. But the big thing with all our speakers, and I absolutely love that they acknowledged us, they acknowledged fibro, the challenges, but the fibro fought. I believe Tyler talked about, the difficulty communicating and how we are on our worst day when we just can't get those thoughts across, the cognitive difficulty that we can have. And not only that, not just expressing ourselves, but ourselves alone thinking, what do I do? I'm experiencing pain. Which therapy route should I take? Is breathing going to do it for me today, or do I need to augment it with, whether it's medicine, movement, warm bath, whatever it may be. I see someone mention that they do jacuzzis and warm water too, and I find that very helpful. So it is interesting how, from if we look back at least 10 years ago, talking to three professionals, the difference, like they acknowledged us because I remember seeing numerous doctors and specialists. And until I went to the pain clinic in Windsor, and the doctor there, she used to be Dr. Charlotte Logan. I'll give her a shout out. Um, and that's just my personal experience with her. I never had a doctor look at me and go, I see you. I see the pain you're in. This lady actually stepped forward, a doctor, and hugged me. And she said, I got you. I'll help you. And she helped me with my pain. She helped get me on a program. And just having that little bit of reassurance and saying, I understand you. You're not like, it's not in your head. We'll sort it out. I never had that. And she was amazing. So we all need that as fibro patients. We all need someone who understands.
I have to say, I think Dr. Furlan has always been that way. And yes, she's a rarity, but she took her medical training and she grew up in Brazil. And I think they have in South America much softer way about medicine. And Tyler also has a degree in psychology. So I think that makes a big difference in his approach to fibromyalgia. And of course, Eleanor is a psychologist. So I think we I think we were very lucky getting
Yes.
to know them. I think they have made a tremendous difference in this community. They're giving a lot to our community. I know Eleanor's just new, but I think Dr. Furlan, I consider her a friend of FAC. So it's interesting. I will just tell a little story that's totally off topic. She contacted me last night and asked me if I had time to meet with her. And I mean, I'm in bed, okay? It's 9 o'clock at night here in Nova Scotia, 8 there in Ontario. So I said, sure. And she wanted to talk to me about ways to improve our YouTube channel and how the ability to offer our closed captions in different languages. And I'm thinking, you are a true friend of Fibromyalgia Association Canada. I mean, I'm sure she has lots of things to do in her life, but she took the time to tell me how we can make our YouTube channel better. And I appreciate that, you know. So and I think that compassion it is what makes her a great doctor, because she is a great doctor. So, yeah, it was a great presentation, I have to say. So,
I
Trudy,
hope,
there, and oh, I'm sorry, Sherry.
no,
Just
I just was going to say I really look forward to and hope we can do them more often. You know, I spend a lot of time in different places like Reddit and forums and places like that where there's support groups or threads, people who also have fibromyalgia who spend a lot of time talking about it, getting tips and help from each other. And one of the most common things I'm seeing lately that I would love to have them focus on maybe in the future is there's a lot of younger women being diagnosed with fibro now, women in their like 18 to 25-year-old range. I mean, that would have made such a difference in my life to be diagnosed at that age for sure. Maybe, I don't know. But one of the most common questions I'm seeing now is like, how do you, what if you want to have kids, right? Like imagining their life in the future and can I have kids? How is this going to affect me, right? So I would love for them to be able to get back with us again and do a presentation on, you know, maybe youth or younger fibromyalgia patients and helping us answer those questions because it's, yeah, it's getting to be such a big thing now. So Maggie, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that I noticed we were speaking about YouTube, and there were 45 views last I checked on that presentation. I believe that was Monday
Wow.
that we did that presentation.
May 20th,
Yeah.
20th. Yeah,
Oh,
so
last
last
week.
Monday.
last Monday.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty significant for, to see that many people watching it so quick. But I agree. I'm very grateful that they came and spoke to us and donated their time and their energy.
Do you know, Sherry, I must address what you said. Um, it was, and research shows that most people are diagnosed between 20 and 50. So, and I have this experience because my grandson has fibromyalgia, and all he keeps hearing is he has growing pains. Well, he's 19 and 6'2", and he stopped growing,
He's
and he
done.
still
Yeah.
has all the symptoms of fibromyalgia, right?
Yeah.
So what was happening was at that end of the spectrum, it was growing pains. And at above 50, it was old age. Oh, everybody that is aging gets pain, right? And
Yeah.
I find that people like, so for example, Dr. Christine Lamontagne, who did a presentation for us, and it's on the YouTube channel, talks about more and more kids are getting diagnosed. And it's because of people like her that more and more people are getting diagnosed. And then here in Nova Scotia at our IWK, which is our children's hospital here, there's a program called Stop Kids in Pain. And so I'm finding they're diagnosing more and more kids with fibromyalgia. So I think you're right. I think that we need to start addressing young people. And I
Mhm.
think we need to address people as they age as well, because it's hard for them to get diagnosed, and it's hard for them. They get to I hate to see this, but they get to the mindset of, oh well, I'm old, this is what old age is going to be like, because that's not my thoughts, and I'm sure it's not yours, Mary. So as we age, it shouldn't make any difference.
A little
and
off topic,
and,
but I would
and
love
yet
to
it
see,
does, right?
sorry, a little off topic, but I would love to see um, a clear view on stats in Canada. Like, because we haven't had any up to date stats in a long time with regard to fibro specific. How long did it take you to diagnose? What age were you when you first, but just like we were talking about the population that has fibro in Canada, and I think Trudy, you mentioned how it's much more now, and we don't have those clear stats, and that would be a great project. That's on my wish list for someone to do. So
Well, you know, one problem with that is there was a research study published last June, and it was about what doctors think about fibromyalgia. I was really shocked that how there's still so many who don't accept it as a condition. But what really shocked me and hurt my feelings, I must say, is 70% of doctors don't want to see fibromyalgia patients. They find us whiny and we take too much time. And
And they
that
can't
shocked.
fix us anyways. They can't fix us anyways, right? So that I'm sure for them, like I can empathize from their point of view. I remember going to my doctor's office and complaining about migraines, and I literally, he had a look of relief on his face, and I swear he was thinking, finally, something I can help you with, right? They the treatments that are available for fibro, they work or they don't, right? Not all of us are
Yes.
lucky to have them work. And when they don't work, what are, like, they've gone through their list of things. What else can I do? I'm sorry you're in pain, but I can't do anything else, right? So from an empathetic standpoint, I understand why they don't want to see us, because it feels like they can't do their job, I'm sure, right? Their job is to
I
heal us. Yeah.
I understand it too, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, we all know they're very, very busy and stressed,
Yeah.
and they only have 15 minutes or maybe 10 minutes per
Yeah.
patient. And I mean, we have fibromyalgia is a complex condition.
Yeah.
And so I totally understand. They could see 3 patients in the time it takes to see one of us. And that's stressful for them because they still have all those patients out in the waiting room. So
And
I
how many
I totally get where they're coming from.
drugs are approved for fibro? Technically, two.
In Canada too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're limited, but it's also about patient involvement, right? We have to take that responsibility on ourselves to like we talked about diabetic, you have to get with a program and you have to stick to it. And yeah, there are going to be days where you might not be able to do something positive or rewarding, but you have to eat well. Sleep is huge. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't expect a magic pill to do it. And that's the one thing I think a lot of people are looking for, a magic pill.
That's a good note to end on, Maggie, because, and I will add that Dr. Furlan told me one time I was talking to her that if we could get our sleep under control, that would really help get everything else under control. But I think what you just said there is it's really on us, and it is. It's on the diabetic, whether they're going to make the changes and live a healthy life if they do, or if they're going to be constantly sick the rest of their life. And that's the same with us. It's on us. We and the thing is, there are things out there. There's lots of things like qigong. Some people do yoga. I personally can't do yoga, but I do qigong. There's tai chi. There's many meditation, many different things. What we have to do is find what works for us, because we are all different.
Yeah.
And I know that because I live in a house with someone else who has fibromyalgia, and things that work for her. I learned this very, very early in my fibromyalgia journey, because her pain was muscle pain, my pain was bone pain, and what worked for me didn't work for her. So, and I think that's what we need to realize, is we have to find our own way, and we have to find what works for us. And it's trial and error. I think, Sherry, you said that, and it is. You try something, doesn't work for you, let's look for something else. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you guys. This has been a wonderful conversation. We need to do this again.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was great.
Buddy,
Thank you.
take care.
And I'm going to stop the recording.